This is the Samsung S26 Ultra, and this is the iPhone 17 Pro Max, the two flagships of 2026. Which one has the better camera setup for photo and video performance? So the new Samsung S26 Ultra has a quad camera setup, with the main being a 200 megapixel, a 50 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, a 10 megapixel 3x zoom, and a 50 megapixel 5x zoom, which is a much different setup than the triple setup of the iPhone 17 Pro Max. The iPhone 17 Pro Max has a triple 48 megapixel fusion camera setup, meaning that all the three lenses, the wide, the main, and the telephoto lens, are a 48 megapixel camera setup. And with the fusion in the naming, means that even when you zoom in ×2 or from 4 to ×8, you get a really nice photo or video. And in my opinion, the two phones, just like their cameras, are definitely that much different. Just from how they look, just from how they are placed, that is how different they are in everyday situation. So in terms of photos, the iPhone has one thing that is really nice. The consistency between the lenses, being all of them being pretty much the same 48 megapixel camera sensors, it just feels much more consistent than the different sensors that you have on the Samsung. But on the other hand, the main camera sensor can go up to 200 megapixels. So if you were to take a photo side by side and do full 48 megapixel versus 200 megapixel, the 200 megapixel is going to be the sharper. But I did notice that a 200 megapixel photo from the main camera sensor and a 48 megapixel photo from the iPhone, there was a little bit of a difference that I did not expect. The Samsung felt sharper, but it definitely felt like it was a little bit more software based sharpened. While on the iPhone, it just felt a little bit more natural than the Samsung's look. But that could be a difference in a lighting situation or a place you're shooting at. In my opinion, the biggest difference between the two phones is gonna be the way they process the photos, because both of these processing of the photos is so much different. So the Samsung photos across the board feel very punchy, very saturated. In my opinion, they just feel very, I would say, a little bit oversaturated at times and a little bit over sharpened at times. We had situations where we're taking photos with the Samsung, it felt like it was much more colorful on the screen than in real life. I guess that is a good thing for some and a minus for others. If you want something that is a little bit more natural, a little bit more how you see it, the iPhone definitely does that better. The iPhone's photos tend to look a little bit more like the real world situation, a little bit more natural, a little bit less edited. Where the Samsung is definitely going over the top with the colors and sharpness. But I'm sure there are people that are gonna love that. Once I saw a comment that said, this is how we remember the things. A little bit over colorful. So the Samsung definitely goes in that direction. Well, the iPhone's photos tend to be a little bit more natural, a little bit like a normal look to them, a little bit less artificial, less edited, and more natural. And in both cases, I'm talking about straight from the camera, without editing them in post-production and without any filters, or in iPhone's case, the photo styles. And while the photo styles are nice, and you can edit those photos really nicely in post-production, I really love the way you can edit the photos in post-production on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. I have to say, just straight out of the camera, side by side, the Samsung is the more punchy, colorful, and overly sharp, while the iPhone is a little bit more natural, a little bit less sharp, and a little bit more like naturally looking to what you see in real life. Another difference is gonna be the wide angle lens. This time I would have to say that the iPhone's is a little bit better because it's a 0.5 times zoom versus the 0.6 times zoom. So it is gonna be on the wider end when compared to the Samsung. Overall, iPhone is one of the more wider when compared to other smartphones, which can be seen in the photos, and it looks very nice. I feel like it's very consistent to the other two lenses. On the Samsung though, the wide angle lens does feel really good too. It is a 0.6 times zoom, so slightly less of a wide angle lens, but it feels very good, very sharp, very colorful. So in both cases, the wide angle lenses are really good. The main camera sensors are a little bit different, but both perform very good. And the telephoto, this is a bigger difference. On the iPhone, we have a 4x zoom, where on the Samsung, we have a 3x zoom and 5x zoom. So essentially, this is going in front and behind the iPhone. And here is a little bit of a difference. The iPhone's 48 megapixel 4x zoom looks very good. It's very nice zoom, and it's pretty sharp. On the Samsung, it's gonna be a little bit different depending on which one you use. The x3 zoom feels to me like it's not that good. You can definitely feel it when changing different lenses that this lens, the x3 zoom, is the worst of all of them. It just doesn't feel as good as the other three. You can definitely feel the downgrade even on the screen when changing between the lenses. But the x5 zoom with 50 megapixel definitely feels like a nice telephoto lens. And with 50 megapixel, it's super sharp. So it's really dependent on which one you're gonna use. And with 50 megapixel, you can actually take a really nice telephoto 5x zoom photo, or actually digitally zoom in and still get a really nice photo. And the moonshot with the Samsung S26 Ultra is definitely viable and looks very good. The software and the hardware can do that good. So the zoom capabilities of the Samsung are really, really good. iPhone this year has been upgraded, and the 48 megapixel fusion camera on the telephoto is a better phone for that, but I have felt that it was a hit and miss in terms of something like a moonshot. There were situations where I got incredible moonshots with the iPhone, but there were also situations where I could not get a good shot of the moon. So it's really a little bit more dependent. And that also goes to the macro. Because the close focusing distance of the camera lenses is much better on the Samsung, you can get a little bit more of the macro shots with all of the lenses when compared to the iPhone. iPhone's main macro lens is the wide angle lens. I much prefer telephoto being the macro. 3 zoom, which I said wasn't the best, is actually the best on the Samsung for macro. A telephoto macro lens is always a big benefit. It just looks much more professional than on a wide angle lens. Overall, I feel like the focusing distance of the iPhone cameras is pretty much the worst thing of the cameras in my opinion. I always feel like I have to go much farther to get the photo, and it's because of that it's harder to get those nice closer shots. On the Samsung, that is a much better thing with all the lenses, and the 3x zoom being a really nice macro can do nice macro shots. But there was one thing that I didn't like, is the enhancement of focus essentially. If you wanted to do the macro, I actually had to turn it off, because when we used that, the photos were going all over the place. It would change all the different lenses and sometimes produce a horrible photo. But if you just turn it off and use the 3x zoom, it looked nice. So for macro, the Samsung is definitely the better of the two. Overall, I would say that just from the camera app, between the two, I personally prefer the iPhones. It just feels a little bit more natural, a little bit less artificial, a little bit less of that smartphone look. While the Samsung is definitely gonna catch you off guard with the colors. It's really punchy, really colorful, and with the screen being an AMOLED, it definitely feels very, very punchy. So if you like a really punchy smartphone kind of a photo, the Samsung is the one to get. If you want a little bit more something that is a little bit natural, less processed, the iPhone definitely feels a little bit more that way. The Samsung has a Pro photo mode, something that is not on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. This iPhone 17 Pro Max can shoot in RAW up to 48 megapixel, but you cannot change things like the shutter speed or ISO. Where on the Samsung you can actually do that. Not only you can shoot in JPEG and RAW and edit these photos in post-production, but also you can change the shutter speed and ISO. You have much more control over the photos from the Samsung. So with these two, you're gonna have a more professional kind of a software on the Samsung S26 Ultra. But thanks to the RAW capabilities on both these phones, you can shoot in RAW, edit them in post-production on the phone or on computer, really push the sensors to their maximum. If you like the way I edit these RAW photos, check out the link down below for my Lightroom presets. Thanks to this, you can edit those photos in one click. So overall, this just gives a little bit more capabilities for someone that really wants to dial in the settings they want to. Well, this is gonna be great quality and the RAWs are really good. There is a lag of that Pro mode. But what about the video side of the two smartphones? And in this comparison, I'm gonna have to just right away say I prefer the iPhone's video. To me, in 2026, it's still the one that I feel like is the best, and I'm gonna talk about that in a second. But there is something I wanted to say about the Samsung S26 Ultra beforehand. It is a really good video phone, but it does feel a little bit over sharpened, and you can definitely feel how much less of colors there is. If, for example, you were to hold the shutter button for a little bit longer when taking a photo, it is gonna go into the video mode. And then you can seamlessly see how it switches from the software processing of the photos, really colorful and punchy, to a very desaturated look with much more contrast. You can see that difference between the software being on the photos and then in the video being a little bit less of that editing. And the sharpness is a little bit over the top in my opinion. I had a situation where I was shooting side by side for testing and there were waves, and those waves were so over sharpened on the Samsung. You could definitely see that right away. Just didn't feel natural at all. And maybe that was a really harsh case scenario, but that showed me how it is processed. Where the iPhone felt much cleaner, or I should say a little bit softer. But that softness makes it look a little bit more professional and like a real camera would. Because a real camera with bigger optics sometimes has that little bit more of a softer feel to it. Something that the iPhone in video mode definitely has, and that makes it feel like a professional grade video. While it's still gonna be the same hardware that we have for photos, it is gonna look a little bit better. And overall, I still feel like the video on the iPhone is the best out there on the market. It doesn't feel just like a normal traditional smartphone video. The lack of sharpness, that artificial sharpness, makes it feel more natural, more like a pro camera, where the Samsung is a little bit over sharpened to my liking. You can also record in different modes, and once again the Samsung has a pro mode for video where you can change the shutter speed, you can change the ISO and turn on log. Just gives you much more professional video settings than the iPhone 17 Pro Max. It's once again something that I miss on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. But you can still record and log in the camera app. But that is actually not all, because you can actually record in log, change the shutter speed and the ISO on the iPhone 17 Pro Max. You just have to get the free Blackmagic app, which works perfectly with the iPhone 17 Pro Max. On it you can select Apple Log 2, you can actually record in log, set everything up the way you want to do, and even shoot in open gate, meaning that you shoot in a little bit more of a squarish footage, but thanks to this you can crop it in post-production to whatever format you want to, just getting more out of the camera. And with Blackmagic camera app, it makes this smartphone even better in video. You can really push this to the maximum. While the Samsung has a pro video mode, and you can set everything the way you want to, straight from the main camera app. So here you have to go to a different one, which is really good, but you have to go to a separate app. On the Samsung, it's built into the camera app. So it's a little bit of the same, but it's kind of like same but different. And both these support log recording, which you can edit in post-production, for example, in DaVinci Resolve. But I do think the Apple Log is a little bit easier to color grade, and it has just more use case scenarios, thanks to this being a Blackmagic app, Apple Log 2 being really easy with color space transform on DaVinci Resolve, just making it more usable. But overall, both are really good if you want to have that extra control. I would say that the video side, I would give it to the iPhone. And in this video, I did not want to get into the nitty-gritty of Android versus iOS and the other extra features like the privacy display or the S Pen. That is something that is going to be different. That is going to be, maybe you want the Android, maybe you want the iOS. But today I just wanted to compare just the performance of the cameras of these two, because these are probably the most sought after high-end flagship devices of 2026. And I was curious which of the two would have the better camera performance. Overall, they're really different. Even though those are like the main high-end flagship devices, they approach everything so much different. And I feel like their target audience is gonna be way different. But I'm really curious, what do you guys think? Which of the two is the better in terms of photos and video? Please let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think, especially based on the samples from today's video. And if you have any more questions about the Samsung S26 Ultra or the iPhone 17 Pro Max, let me know in the comment section down below. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you guys enjoyed this video once again, and I'll see you next time.